In the aftermath of the battle, the room was eerily silent. The bodies of mercenaries and fallen soldiers littered the ground, the scent of gunpowder still hanging in the air. Penn, Alvarez, Nurse, and Awali stood together, their faces drawn and weary but alive. The PMC, still bound to the chair, stared at them in disbelief. You actually survived." Alvarez turned to him, his expression hard as stone. "We're not done yet. You're coming with us." The man swallowed, his bravado completely shattered. He nodded, knowing he had no other choice. As the coalition soldiers secured the room, Penn glanced at her team, her family. They had faced impossible odds and survived. But the cost had been high. "Let's get out of here," Alvarez said, his voice soft but resolute. The team nodded in agreement. They had survived this battle, but the war was far from over. As they walked out of the ruined room, the weight of their survival settled heavily on their shoulders. They had held the line, but the scars of battle would remain with them forever. The PMC watched them with a mixture of amusement and fear. He knew what was coming, but he still didn't seem to grasp the severity of the situation. He opened his mouth to say something, but Alvarez shot him a warning glare that quickly silenced him. The door creaked open, and a group of heavily armed mercenaries stepped into the room, their weapons at the ready. For a brief moment, there was silence as both sides sized each other up. Then, all hell broke loose. Penn fired the first shot, her bullet finding its mark in the neck of the lead mercenary. He crumpled to the floor without a sound, his weapon clattering beside him. Nurse followed up with a burst of suppressive fire, forcing the remaining mercenaries to dive for cover. Alvarez moved swiftly, his sidearm spitting out precise, deadly shots as he advanced. 2 more mercenaries fell before the rest managed to return fire, forcing him back behind cover. "Penn, take the left." "Nurse, cover the right." Alvarez barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. Penn moved quickly, her rifle firing in controlled bursts as she took down another mercenary. Nurse kept up a steady stream of fire, his shots forcing the enemy to stay pinned behind cover. But the mercenaries weren't going to give up easily. More of them poured into the room, their weapons blazing. The sound of gunfire filled the air, deafening and relentless. Penn felt a bullet was past her head, narrowly missing her, and she ducked behind a pile of debris, her heart pounding. "We're getting overrun," she called out, reloading her rifle with shaking hands. "Hold the line." Alvarez shouted back, his voice steady despite the chaos. The mercenaries pushed harder, their numbers overwhelming the small Cerberus team. Penn could feel the pressure mounting, her pulse racing as the enemy closed in. They couldn't hold out much longer. Just as she was about to give up hope, there was a deafening explosion, and the far wall of the room was blown inward. Smoke and debris filled the air, obscuring everything in a thick cloud. For a moment, Penn couldn't see anything, her ears ringing from the blast. Then, out of the smoke, a towering figure emerged, a sentinel. The hulking mechanical war machine stomped into the room, its red-eyed glowing menacingly in the darkness. It moved with a purpose, its massive form blocking out the light as it advanced. Penn's heart sank. The sentinel was a death sentence. The sentinel's approach was slow but deliberate, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground beneath them. The mercenaries took advantage of the distraction, firing wildly as they moved to flank the Cerberus team. Penn returned fire, but she knew it was only a matter of time before they were overwhelmed. "We need to take that thing down," Nurse shouted, his voice barely audible over the sound of gunfire. Penn nodded, her eyes locked on the sentinel. Its red eyes scanned the room, zeroing in on their positions. They needed a plan, and fast. "Oh, Wally," Alvarez called out. "Get that charge ready. We're taking this thing down." Oh, Wally, who had been silent up until now, nodded grimly. He pulled out a small explosive charge from his pack and moved swiftly toward the sentinel, staying low to avoid the incoming fire. Penn and Nurse provided cover, their shots forcing the mercenaries to keep their heads down. The sentinel, meanwhile, continued its relentless march forward, its damaged cannon arm sparking as it tried to fire. Wally reached the sentinel's leg and quickly attached the charge, his hands moving with practiced precision. He armed the device and quickly retreated, his heart pounding in his chest. "Fire in the hole," he shouted, diving behind cover just as the charge detonated. The explosion rocked the room, and the sentinel staggered as its leg was blown off at the knee. Sparks flew from the severed limb, and the machine wobbled unsteadily before crashing to the ground with a deafening thud. For a moment, there was silence as the smoke cleared. Then, all at once, the remaining mercenaries opened fire again, their desperation evident. They knew their time was running out. Penn fired back, her shots precise and deadly. She took down 2 more mercenaries before ducking behind cover, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "We're almost out of ammo," she called out. Alvarez grimaced. "We hold until reinforcements get here." Penn wasn't sure if they could. Their supplies were almost gone, and they were outnumbered. But they didn't have a choice. They had to fight. The gunfire continued, deafening and relentless. Penn's vision blurred from exhaustion, her body screaming for rest. But she couldn't stop. Not now. Suddenly, there was a loud crash, and the door to the room was blown open. A squad of coalition soldiers stormed in, their weapons blazing. The mercenaries, caught off guard, were quickly overwhelmed. Penn sagged with relief as the last of the mercenaries fell. They had done it. Reinforcements had arrived. Alvarez lowered his weapon, his face pale but determined. "We held," he said quietly. Penn nodded, her body trembling from the adrenaline. They had held the line. They had survived. In the aftermath of the battle, the room was eerily silent. The bodies of mercenaries and fallen soldiers littered the ground, the scent of gunpowder still hanging in the air. Penn, Alvarez, Nurse, and Awali stood together, their faces drawn and weary but alive. The PMC, still bound to the chair, stared at them in disbelief. You actually survived." Alvarez turned to him, his expression hard as stone. "We're not done yet. You're coming with us." The man swallowed, his bravado completely shattered. He nodded, knowing he had no other choice. As the coalition soldiers secured the room, Penn glanced at her team, her family. They had faced impossible odds and survived. But the cost had been high. "Let's get out of here," Alvarez said, his voice soft but resolute. The team nodded in agreement. They had survived this battle, but the war was far from over. As they walked out of the ruined room, the weight of their survival settled heavily on their shoulders. They had held the line, but the scars of battle would remain with them forever.